What is up, and welcome back to Music Talks. My name is Brennan, and this is the first official episode. I'm super excited about it. I hope you guys are too. We're going to get into all of the music from 2024. Maybe not all of it in this episode, maybe some in the next one as well. But I'm super excited. I have been looking through all of the music for this year, thinking about albums, song releases, all of that, and kind of trying to compile the best of the best this year. There's been some really good music that's released this year. There's also been some really bad music that released this year. Overall, it has been an oversaturated year with thousands and thousands of releases from established artists, from brand new artists, from artists making their comebacks from 7 to 10 years ago. It's been all over the place, and it's honestly been pretty jam-packed the entire year. Like, there has not been a month, maybe outside of January, that we haven't seen just a major influx in music come in. And it's honestly pretty exciting for somebody who likes to listen to pretty much all kinds of music. It's also a little bit exhausting, and it's very sad for wallets too. So it is what it is. But I have put together, and we're going to talk about the best albums of 2024. I'm such an albums nerd. I know some people don't really care about albums. They'd rather just listen to singles. But I think like having a full body of work and releasing it is such a cool thing. And if I had the ability to sing, I'd be making albums all the time. I usually try to make a list every year of like the top 10 albums that I have reviewed or what I think is the best of the best. This year has been really, really hard to do that just because of how many releases that have come out. So instead have decided to just kind of like make a list in no particular order. We will see where it happens. I think the best way to do this is just go month by month. So when I was, getting ready to do this, I was going back month by month and listening to new albums that have came out from those months and kind of just going from there, right? And kind of seeing how the trends have changed over the year and seeing how the listening experience has changed as well. So I think I've got like almost around 60, maybe 55 albums to go through. So we're definitely not going to get through all of those today, but they're going to be in no specific order. We're going to start in January, move all the way to December. That also gives me time if somebody has any more surprise releases for the end of the year. Because people love to do that, and that's hard to make lists and review albums when they're constantly coming out with surprise drops. Anyways, we're going to get right into it. Starting in January. So usually January is a pretty slow time of new releases, especially the beginning of the year and December of the previous year as well, because nobody wants to compete with holiday music or just the hustle and bustle of Christmas time and all of that. Everybody's too busy to take in and to really experience new music, new sound, right? And I think it's also very, very important to realize that even 100 years later, we're still listening to the same Christmas songs that still go number one. I mean, Mariah Carey goes number one on the charts literally every single year with All I Want for Christmas Is You. So I think that just goes to show the power of holiday music. And then we even have like Brenda Lee, who wrote and performed Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree, that went number one for the first time ever last year in December, or maybe it was January. I don't know. First time ever, which is pretty insane that it's been like 30, 40 years since it was released. Maybe not that much, but a very, very long time. So just long story short, nobody wants to compete with the holidays. And unless you have like a super, super solid or established fan base or like just love from the general public, it's not really in the best interest of a label or the artist to release the very beginning of the year or the very end of the year. Now, things could always change. 2025 is looking to be extremely packed in the early months, which this is one of the first years that I've ever seen it look like that in probably like the past 5 to 6 years. And I think that's really just a little bit to do with the number of releases that came out this year and how many people pushed their releases back to next year so that they were able to maybe get a little bit more critical acclaim, not have to compete on the charts or in sales with so many large artists. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just making this up. But I've been looking at releases that are coming out in the beginning of January, and there's so many that are coming out like the last week of January, like the 24th, 25th, and it's insane. Like I'm excited for it because there's always this like big drought for like a couple months for people that just like love listening to new music. There's nothing coming out, and I'm just like sitting around waiting, and that's not going to happen next year. But that is next year. We will talk about it in a couple months. Now we're going to go back to January. Like I said, a lot of releases came out this year, and it has been not like this pretty much since I can remember in my life, right? I mean, there have been years that I remember, especially like 2020, who really had just like the epitome of a year that was just golden in music, which is insane to think about 2020 being that, considering how awful the world was at this time, and considering that we were completely shut down and we couldn't dance, we couldn't go out to clubs, you couldn't listen to anything really if it wasn't in your home. So considering that like 2020 was one of those years that we just got like a golden year of music is insane. But with that, we still did not get too much music, right? Like I feel like there was a nice flow from month to month to where we were like able to digest the projects and appreciate them. And, you know, especially with the boom of TikTok, we saw a lot of new artists come about and get a chance to shine, things like that. So, yeah, it was a start for a lot of things, but I feel like 2020 has been the most recent year where we've seen such a big boom of music. However, it still does not compare to this year at all. This is the busiest year in my 26 years of life in the music industry that I can remember. Obviously, I was very, very young and didn't remember those early couple of years. But looking back and just like comparing this year compared to other years, it's honestly insane. And there was really no true answer for that. I think that last year we didn't have anything out of the ordinary happen, and this year either. And so when we started to hear about all of the releases that were going to be coming out for 2024, people were like, oh my gosh, because we were getting the return of legendary acts like Beyoncé and Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, The Weeknd. You know, we were going to see Dua Lipa, Taylor Swift was going to drop stuff. There's going to be a lot of big names that were dropping projects. And we didn't even know about all of the other smaller artists or indie artists or brand new people or people that were going to blow up on the scene. So much was happening. So I think everyone was just kind of like, the comment that I saw on Twitter a whole lot, which I thought was really funny, was that everyone was like, the Grammys are going to be a bloodbath. And that was kind of true. But it's been interesting to see how people have shifted their releases and their calendars and to just kind of like strategically work to figure out what's the best time to release their music. But with all of that being said, we really didn't get an answer as to why so many releases came out this year. I mean, it just seemed like, from a standpoint of someone who listens to any type of genre, who listens every Friday to the new albums that are coming out, it was just like there was no time to sit with a project and enjoy it for more than like a week or two before we were getting some other major release or a debut project from somebody. So I don't know. I think that that's crazy. And yeah, it's the first year like that in a very long time. I don't know if it's going to be kind of a foreshadowing into how the music industry is going to work going forward. But yeah, a lot happened, and my only complaint with music this year is that because there was so many releases, they could have been more evenly distributed throughout the year than they were, because we are going to have a very, very weak beginning and end to 2024 as far as releases, but you're going to have that sweet spot between like March, April, May, and then you're going to have like July, August, September, where there's just like a big boom, always something coming out. And that's exactly what happened. So that's my only complaint with that. The other thing I will say is there was a lot of good projects this year. There was also a lot of really bad projects. And I think that so many people were, I don't know if that was necessarily an artist standpoint or maybe an industry standpoint, that so many people were pushing out projects and music that I don't think that we got the best work from even some established artists. I feel like there was a lot of letdowns. There was a lot of disappointing albums from people that I was really looking forward to hearing their music. And I think it was just because there was so much and the competition was so heavy that you had to kind of be very, very confident in your work and not be too experimental, not try to follow the trends. You had to really make something that was fresh and new and exciting, or something that an established fan base would follow. And some people were not able to hold through with that. Now, some people it worked for. There's obviously some major trends that we saw this year. Everybody wants to get into country, which, as someone in the Nashville community and appreciates and grew up on country music, I love that. I think it's super cool. One of the cool things about country music is the storytelling and just how down to earth and authentic it can be. And I think when people start to kind of get into country music or try out country music and they're not from that background originally, and when I say background, I guess when they're not from that musical background, maybe that they're from a country background, you sometimes get better songwriting, you sometimes get better hits, you get better projects as a whole because they operate from a standpoint of making the best art no matter what genre it is. So we saw a lot of country music, and that's a really big push in the industry right now, is that labels really want people to put out country-inspired albums, Western, folk, alternative. And part of that is because of last year we saw the big boom of people like Noah Kahan and Zach Bryan, who have this really established sound that has gone viral and people have just fallen in love with. And everybody wants to follow that trend. And I think that it is a good sound. I just think that you have to be authentic in wanting to do that, and you have to be authentic in making it still unique to you and not sound like everybody else, because there are some products this year that have successfully done that. Some that surprised the heck out of me, but some that were so bland and boring because you could tell maybe that they wanted to try something new, but it didn't feel the most authentic to that artist, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot with that. I really feel like anybody can make any type of music. If that's what they desire to do, if they think they can make a country record, I say go for it. But I think that whenever we're trying out different genres and experimenting with things, it's important to put your own touch on it, put your own personal experience in that. And so we've seen some people do that very, very well this year. We're going to talk about those. Besides country, there's been a really, really big boom of R&B music this year. And I think that last year in 2023, we kind of saw a renaissance of R&B music thanks to it kind of coming back into the forefront in the general public. So, you had artists like Tyla and Coco Jones and Victoria Monet and I mean, there's several, but those are some of the big ones that come to mind that kind of had major mainstream hits, right? They had major breakthroughs in the general public that kind of opened up the doors to R&B to several established artists. SZA, that's another really, really big one, especially with her. I mean, I have never seen an R&B artist outside of Beyoncé, if you consider her R&B. I've never seen an R&B artist hit mainstream to the level that SZA did, which granted, she had a phenomenal album, but it was SZA and Coco Jones and Tyla and all of these people that came on the scene and really opened it up to the general public again, and not just kind of those that are diehard R&B lovers. And so this year we saw a lot of projects from established artists, from brand new artists, all kinds of things. Yeah, I think it was super, super, super cool to see R&B kind of come back and kind of come a little bit more back into mainstream. We haven't had that in a couple years. But yeah, I think that it's super cool to see. I feel like we've also had kind of a focus on like, I don't want to say weird, but like just very unique pop music, things that are just different, maybe a little outlandish, maybe a little bit just over the top, but very, very unique pop music to say. That has definitely shined through because we have seen so many big artists have successful albums. However, we've seen them critically and financially not sell to the levels of some brand new artists on the scene like Chapel Roan, or we have breakthroughs like Sabrina Carpenter and Charlie XCX who have been on the scene for a while but really saw a big boom this year due to just like their really unique, cool projects. And we saw other artists that kind of really blew up like Benson Boone and Teddy Swims and of course Tyla. Just a lot of artists that are very, very new to the scene, and we saw them kind of take control of 2024. We saw albums from Beyoncé and Dua Lipa and Taylor Swift and Katy Perry, but those weren't the albums that everyone was constantly talking about, which granted, great albums from some of those people, but everyone wanted new. And I think because we were so oversaturated with the industry just giving us so much so fast, that there was no time to digest all of these big releases because we were constantly going from boom, boom, boom. I mean, I think in the time span of like a month, we got releases from Billie Eilish, Ariana Grande, Dua Lipa, Taylor Swift, somebody else I'm forgetting, maybe Charlie XCX, I don't know. That they all came within like a week of each other, right? And those are massive projects. And so people were turning to something new and fresh they have not ever seen before. So that was really cool. We've seen just the celebration of being new and different, especially in pop music, and just the joy that comes from that. And I think that is so cool. All right, so I've only got 3 albums for the month of January, which is honestly more than you would expect. But the first one is Orquídeas by Kali Uchis. So last year we got Red Moon and Venus from Kali Uchis, which was an R&B album, pretty much all English. Had collaborations with like Summer Walker, Don Toliver, Omar Apollo. It was an R&B centric album, but it definitely had a little bit of her like normal Latin flair that she has in her music. It was the first album by her that I really liked as a whole. This was a fully Latin album, and this was the first fully Latin album from her that I like completely fell in love with. I loved it. I think that it definitely showcased her ability to be very versatile in her music, even when we're in Spanish music, while Latin music and Mexican music is just a very, very large space. And I think that there's so many different cultures and aspects and things that you can do there. And she's kind of able to show everything that she has to bring to the table, and not just normal R&B sounds from her. Now, granted, she's always going to have a little bit of that R&B kind of smoothness because her voice is just so beautiful and so calming, so cool and smooth. There's literally no one who has a voice that is comparable to her. Now, granted, she doesn't hit these insane massive notes, but she has like this just like earthy lightness to her voice that is almost angelic. It just sounds so cool. And I think that is what brings people to her music. It's not necessarily the instrumentation or the genre, but it's her voice, and it's just so unique. And it just shows that like no matter if it's a fully English project or a Spanish project, you're going to bring people in. And obviously I cannot speak Spanish fluently, but that is, there's language barriers mean nothing to me when you're listening to music, because you can still get something and take something away from it. She had 3 big collaborations on this album. Let's see here. Peso Pluma, which he is the next it boy in Spanish music. We had Karol G and Rauw Alejandro, who are all 3 booming and major right now. And I don't know, Kali Uchis is, I feel like, bigger on a pop scale than she is on a Spanish music scale. So I would like to see her get a little bit more credit in that department. But I think this was just a really good start to the year to get her project. Let's see. It debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, which is a record for her. She's never hit that high. And I definitely think that it helped her a lot releasing so early in the year, because I think if she had released a little bit later in the year, she would have kind of gotten lost in all of the other major releases. And so I'm glad that she got this album out very, very early in the year. This was definitely the calm before the storm, and she really only hit number 2 under 21 Savage, because any major rap star is automatically going to hit number 1 on the charts. But number 2 is really, really good for her. Definitely a record for her. If you don't care to listen to music that's not in your native language, this album is phenomenal, and I think that you should check out her work as well. The next one is probably one that a lot of you guys are not going to be familiar with, and that is a country newcomer. His name's Connor Smith. His album, Smoky Mountains, also came out in January, and this was my first venture into Connor's music as well. And I think that country music is definitely a very, very close community. It's a close genre, and it doesn't always encompass a lot of different sounds. But whenever I am going to go look for new country music, new sounds, new artists, the thing that always draws me in the most is when they have like classics and roots, but they still have something new to bring to the table, right? They don't sound like every other corny 2000s and even 2020s country song, right? They're bringing something new and authentic that is unique to them, but also still very loyal to country. And I think that he's definitely done that. We've seen a lot of new coming country artists really, really blow up on TikTok and really use that atmosphere. And I think that a lot of country artists, or maybe just the industry, doesn't really know what to do with that. So they're kind of relying on all of these artists who are just being themselves and putting themselves out there and putting out their music for people to enjoy. And it's really tapping into that country market. And I think it's tapping into more of a global and at least a nationwide scale, and not just in Nashville. And that's really cool to see. And I think that's definitely been the case with him. Let's see here. He had one song go viral. That was Creek Will Rise. And it actually debuted at number 89 on the Hot 100, which I think is insane with your debut album to have a song, especially in country as a newcomer, to just blow up that fast is insane. It's so really good for him. But yeah, I think the thing that I always find in his music is that I just feel like I'm learning about him and his story and what's important to him, but is still rooted in traditional country. Yeah, there's some really, really great songs on that album. There's a really, really good collaboration with another up-and-coming artist named Haley Witters called Roulette on the Heart. It is a heartbreaking song. Like there are actually a couple different songs on that album that are very sad, but very relatable. And it's not all about beers, guns, and trucks. And that's what stands out to me the most. He's got a really bright future ahead of him. I know he ended up releasing another EP later in the year, so he's obviously feeling on fire about writing and releasing music. And he's got a bright future. I'm excited to see what he does next. If you like music that is traditional but still very progressive in the country realm, definitely check him out. So the third and final release of January that I'm going to talk about is the album Lola by the artist Goth Babe. So anytime I talk about this artist, people are automatically very, very confused as to what kind of music this is. And when you say the name Goth Babe, you don't think of a white guy in his 20s traveling in a camper with his dog and sailing and surfing through Mexico. And that is exactly what it is. And the title of, or I guess the name of his band, comes from the title of a Surf Curse song called Goth Babe. And that was his favorite song. He didn't know what else to name himself and his band, so he went with Goth Babe. But if you're not familiar with him, he has this honestly very, very unique indie kind of like almost like Hawaiian-ish. I don't even know how to surfer sound that is just very, very unique to him. It's like the perfect beach music, perfect vibe for like just letting loose summer music. He's very big into like conservation and protecting the earth and just traveling and outdoors. And I think that he's brought that community together with his music, and he's been like slowly rising in the ranks with that community, as well as, I don't know, hippies or just people that enjoy like carefree, fun, relaxing music that just also feels like a complete trip. Honestly, it's just so good. And I've actually been following Goth Babe for a couple years, and I've seen him in concert a couple times. And for me, his music was not it was starting to show a lot of repetitiveness in his sound and his songs, and they're starting to sound the same. So I was a little bit weary of his project. I mean, he's been releasing music since like 2015, and so for him to just get a debut album out this year, he's obviously put a lot of hard work into that. And so he's released a lot of he released a debut EP, and then like several little projects, more EPs, singles, just a lot of music, but no like full body of work. But they, like I said, they all started to kind of sound the same. So I was a little bit weary of what a whole project from him was going to sound like if it was going to kind of just run together with the rest of his music. But he definitely surprised me and made a really, really good album. I know also too that he was living in like a tiny home and writing music and producing in it by himself with his laptop, and I think that like his house caught on fire or something, and so like he lost all of his music and had to start over. So I think that was kind of cool to get that perspective too, of maybe getting some music that he never would have wrote if he hadn't ran into this hardship. So we got some really cool things out of it. But yeah, he's definitely got just this fresh sound, especially with this project. There are songs on here. Crocodile on this album, one of the most well-produced songs of the year. It honestly is like the perfect song for a club, but it's also the perfect song for like surfing and just laying on the beach and relaxing. So this album is just great if you like those kind of vibes, missing summertime in the cold, all of that. Definitely look into him. So moving into February, we're getting a tad bit busier, but still not much of a boom yet. Two major albums stood out to me in February. The first one is Prelude to Ecstasy by The Last Dinner Party. So a lot of people, especially in the US, they're not very familiar with this band. This is a debut album from them. This is a 5-piece girl band. They write and play all of their own music, do all the vocals themselves. They're very talented, very cool. They had kind of a little bit of a blow up in Europe and the UK, especially with their song Nothing Matters, which I don't even know how to explain it. Their sound almost has like, it's very, reminds me of like Kate Bush, a little bit of like Queen was all girls, music that is like 100% meant to play live and to rock out to. And they just have this like very, very cool, edgy rock sound that sounds very, very much like it's from the past, but also 100% sounds like it's in the present, right? So I think that's super cool. It's just, they have a lot of that Kate Bush sound, and I think they're phenomenal. I think they're great. I think they've got a great future ahead of them. I think they really started to gain some more traction in the U.S. after they played Coachella this year. It was cool to see their set. They did really good. They have great stage presence. But if you like kind of that alt-rock sound, especially from an all-girl group that's not necessarily a traditional girl group, this is definitely the sound for you. It was produced by James Ford, and he's worked with a lot of people, especially in the UK. Arctic Monkeys, Florence and the Machine, Jessie Ware, which granted those are kind of all over the place, but very, very heavily well respected and critically acclaimed artists and albums over time. So they definitely have got good producers on their side that has helped them craft their sound, and it's working for them. So definitely check them out. The other big album for February that I just completely fell in love with, and it ended up being one of my all-time favorite albums of this year, and that is Brittany Howard's sophomore album, What Now? So, if you're not familiar with Brittany, first off, she is a powerhouse vocal, has an amazing, amazing voice, and honestly is very underrated. Like, no one talks about her vocal abilities, her skills. She's insane, honestly. Also, too, she is the lead singer of the band Alabama Shakes. If you're not familiar with Alabama Shakes, Sound and Color is one of the most phenomenal albums of all time. I recommend it to literally anyone. It is such a great album, all over the place in sound wise, but it is so, so good. And so I've kind of followed Brittany a little bit ever since Alabama Shakes has kind of disappeared, honestly, waiting for you to come back wherever you are. I think their last album came out in 2015, maybe 2017, 18, somewhere in there. Anyways, it's been a long time since we've gotten an album from them. Brittany likes to do a lot of side projects. She likes to do a lot of solo, but she's got a couple other bands as well. But this album from her is by far her best work. She's very well respected in the industry, and so I was very, very shocked to see her not get a lot of acclaim from this and not see a lot of people talking about it. I honestly expected so many people to be talking about this, especially in that kind of alternative sound. I haven't really seen many people talk about this, but it is such a very, very fun kind of trippy psychedelic album. It's very experimental. There are some songs. She's also an extremely, extremely good guitarist. So there's, I think, one, maybe two tracks on the album that are just her straight shredding the guitar and literally killing it for just 2 to 3 minutes. And I think that's so cool to hear. But some really cool sounds on there. She's got some dance, some synth, some folk, some rock. She's kind of all over the place, but I think that it all kind of works together. It's one of those albums that, if you listen from beginning to end, it sounds phenomenal, just listening to it as a whole experience. And I think she had also said, too, that she wrote this while she was on the road and touring, and she kind of had the perspective that maybe no one would hear this sound, maybe that no one would hear these particular songs for another record. So she just kind of let loose and let herself create without fear or without boundaries, things like that. And I think that that's what made it such an experimental sound, but also extremely fun and just really, really good, solid production, as well as her vocals. And she really likes voiceovers and spoken word, things like that. So I think all of it works together to just really showcase Brittany as a whole and all that she has to offer. So definitely listen to that one. Still kind of upset that one did not get as much attention as it should have, but it is what it is. So March is March Madness for multiple reasons this year. This was the big boom. This is when everything started dropping, releasing. There's so many albums we have to talk about in March. Some really good ones. Some of my favorite and the ones that I've continuously gone back to throughout this whole year. The first one is from a singer named Bryn Cartelli, who this is her debut album called Out of the Blue. She is a phenomenal songwriter. This is a very stripped back, honest, pure pop record. But in terms of pop, you're gonna lean more towards the songwriting aspect and not necessarily the dance or the radio hits. But she won The Voice, I believe, a couple years ago. And of course, The Voice is not known for producing stars. It's more about the the judges in that aspect, but she is a phenomenal singer who's quite young but has like this just really unique kind of raw, deep voice. Um, and even though she's young, she has very mature songwriting, very similar to Taylor Swift. I wouldn't say that her music is similar to Taylor Swift, but there are some really gut-wrenchingly honest songs on this record. One of the songs on the album, Secondhand Smoke, which I think had a very small kind of wave on TikTok, but she just has the songwriting down, and I think that that's what really kills it for her. Really great record, great songs, a little bit depressing, I will say, but it very much gets down the storytelling aspect of pop music and just being authentic in that. So I'm really excited to see what she does next, and that's not an album that I've heard anyone talk about at all. Definitely look into her. Super, super great artist, and I'm sure she's been working for a really, really long time, and I hope that she gets her credit. This second one I have on the list here is a country icon, a country modern day icon, and that is Miss Casey Musgraves with her 5th album, Deeper Well. Now, Casey is moved beyond the Nashville sphere. She has moved beyond the country realm into full global stardom. She is one of the biggest names in country music, and honestly has crossed over into mainstream as well. This is a return to roots for her. Her last album, Starcrossed, was a breakup album. It was a divorce album. Her telling her story, telling us what has happened after her album before that, which was Golden Hour, which is one of the greatest albums of all time. It had a major, major switch. Of course, her first 2 albums were very, very, very laid-back country, very traditional, very hometown feeling. And Golden Hour, her 3rd album, was this sonically cohesive, beautiful trip of a country album that ended up winning Album of the Year, the Grammys, and has gone on to be named literally one of the best albums of all time. It is so, so good, and I would recommend that album to anyone. So she started to kind of drift away from that traditional country sound with Golden Hour, but with her 4th album, Starcrossed, she went almost into a full kind of pop sound. There was very, very little country. Now, it was still country to her, and she still labeled it as a country album. However, the country influences were much, much significantly smaller than her previous releases. However, this album is a complete 360 and a return to, like I said, her roots. This is an artist that loves country music and also completely has gotten down the folk and kind of country western kind of unplugged sound, so to speak. She has completely mastered it, and she's done it in her own way. Casey has a very unique voice to where it's just very, very pretty, very soft, but her songwriting is also very unique to her and also very unique for country music. Imagery is a really big thing for her, and just very colorful. There's a song on this album called Anime Eyes, which I think is, one, it's funny. It's not common in music or in country music at all to just kind of like talk about those kind of topics and aspects, and the storytelling is just top tier on this. This was honestly a massive, massive comeback for her, because it also happened so early in the year. I think this was also to her benefit because she was able to hit number 2 on the Billboard 200, which is insane for a country artist, right? Especially a female in country music that was able to hit number 2 for overall sales in the U.S. in the first week is unheard of. But she's very deserved for her I definitely stand by this album for her. I do kind of feel like it faded into oblivion a little bit after, all of the major releases of this year. However, it was a solid project. I got to attend the album release party where she talked about the songs, where she talked about the inspiration and kind of like coming back to herself, right? And I think that was kind of maybe everyone else's thought, was that Golden Hour, her third album, was like the peak, and then with hardship and breakups and loss and divorce, she went through her fourth album that kind of took her in a different direction. And now she's kind of recentering herself. I think a big part of this album is what she said is that her Saturn has returned. And so she's kind of getting back to her sound and what makes her happy. And having seen her sing these songs and sing the album full through for the first time in March of this year, she was very passionate and very, very, very much excited to sing these songs on the road. Of course, she is on tour now, so I am going to get to see her in December of this year. Super excited about that. But this is a great album from her. And she just continues to kind of reinvent herself. Now, while this is kind of more into her roots, it's still completely new and fresh. And I went back to it very, very often this year. So this next one is from a brand new artist who has completely dominated literally everything this year, and that is Tyla. Tyla is, I think some people consider her Rihanna reincarnated. She has such a passion for Afro beats, and she's one of the first African women to break through and to achieve the things that she's achieved with her debut album that's self-titled. But she's also got R&B influences and just pop, and she's honestly been labeled as a new pop girl, even though she knows that her music kind of stretches across multiple genres, multiple different sounds. I think it's really cool to see. It's really, really great to see artists that are capable of bending genres but still staying true to their roots and still staying true to not necessarily what you're labeled as, but as far as what you want your music to be labeled as and what you want your music to represent. And it's very, very clear that her background, her roots, her culture is very important to her. And Afrobeats is kind of a new thing. It's still on the rise in the U.S. Obviously, it's not a new genre, but it's new to the U.S. and new to that visibility aspect. And so she has definitely been one of the forefronts of this genre and just bringing in that sound. She debuted extremely high on the Billboard 200. I feel like it was in the top 20 for sure. And that's really high for a brand new artist debut, but also with an R&B act, right? Because like I said, she was one of those that brought in that R&B renaissance last year with her hit Water, that blew up on TikTok, right? And I've seen a lot of people say that she's kind of popped up and she's an industry plant. And honestly, I don't believe that. I think she's just very authentic. She's new. She's very passionate about where she comes from in her music. And being a fan of R&B music, this album is very, very rooted in Afro beats, but it is so, so good. Like, there is not anyone else making music like her. And like I said, a lot of people are calling her Rihanna reincarnated. And I think that is true, because I see a lot of early Rihanna in her style and her sound. And I think that she's got a really, really great future ahead of her. She got collaborations with Becky G and Skillabang and Thames is one of those that are also kind of leading that charge in Afro beats and that sound. And just a really great sound, really great album. No skips on that album whatsoever. It's fun, it's exciting, it's danceable. There are some slower songs. She just kind of encompasses all that she has to offer, and I hope that we get another album from her soon, because she is great. Moving on to one of the last albums of March, and that one was In Search of the Antidote by Fletcher. Fletcher has kind of been like a mid-tier as far as like success and fame in like the pop and alternative sound. She has been around for a very long time, but I feel like she's gone under the radar for a very, very long time. And she had, one hit on the radio a couple years ago, Undrunk, and then after that, it kind of just seemed like people were not paying enough attention to her as she continued to craft her sound and kind of be authentic and true to her. And I really enjoyed her first album, Girl of My Dreams, which was a phenomenal album. It was pure pop. A lot of fun songs on that project, as well as just like gut-wrenchingly sad songs on that project as well. And so I was interested to see what she did next. And this album is like a complete turnaround from her first album. I really wasn't sure what direction she was going in with this album. I think that she had personally gone through some breakups, gone through some growth, some change, and she kind of grew as a songwriter for sure. We kind of had this fun, not immature, but more fun and oblivious approach on the first album, to whereas on this album she's centered in herself and she's doing a lot of self-reflection. She's doing a lot of thinking about the past, about the future, about what she wants for herself, and who she wants out of someone who loves her. And I think while it's very open and honest to her, it's also extremely relatable. And she talks about in so many of the songs about being an anxious avoidant and those attachment styles. And there's it's just a very mature sound, but I feel like it's very relatable. And with all of this, like I said, it's completely different from her first album, not only because of the songwriting, but this has more of a rocky edge to it. It's got it's stripped away all of the dance sound, the synths, the electronic, and is focused more on this edgy rock sound. And I think that she really tapped into something that we didn't know that she was capable of doing so well at, and allowed her to kind of really show powerhouse vocals and just show how much that she can belt and how much she can hit these crazy notes, right? And so, like I said, it's just very raw. These lyrics are relatable, and they're things that everybody goes through, but they're still completely relatable to everyone in some way, I think that with that, she's got this kind of ability to write songs in a way where she's creating these analogies and these alliterations and things like that. Like one of her songs is called Joyride, and I think in the lyrics it says, take the keys to my heart, take me out for a joyride. So just kind of like things like that, for example, to where she's able to create this imagery, but also like speak openly and honestly to the person she loves through this like really unique, cool way. And also along with that too, she's got some really good songs that are just like straight storytelling. She released this song several months before the album came out, but it was called Eras of Us, and it was about her running into her ex at the Eras tour for Taylor Swift. And that was one of the most depressing songs I've ever heard. About she says, like, how are you doing? How have you been? I've been practicing this moment, but I never thought I'd see you again. That's like straight up like how everyone feels about their ex, right? Like that dreaded, gut-wrenching feeling of running into your ex in public and having to do the small talk and all of that stuff, and having to like relive all of those moments in front of them and like just go through all of the emotions again. That is like what this album feels like, is just like being relatable and being like, dang, that's exactly what that feels like. And so she's really like tapped into that. And one of the other songs that she has on the album that just really sticks out to me is Attached to You, where in the bridge she says, I'd rather walk on glass than give someone the opportunity to hurt me, which is honestly really, really depressing, but it is so genius, and it's so raw and so real. And this whole album is only like 11 songs, but it is so relatable. And I have put a couple people onto this album this year who have completely fallen in love with it and have also cried in it. So forewarning there. But yeah, she's got it down. And I have to say, like, nobody can write a bridge like Fletcher. Like, she's just got it down pat. But yeah, I think the whole idea of it being called In Search of the Antidote is that she's spent so much time trying to find things that are going to fix her problems or heal her and things like that. And that's kind of very true to the human experience, right? We're so often looking here and there to find what we need in everything. So definitely a relatable album. So solid. I would say one of the top 5 albums of this year. So underrated. And yeah, check it out for sure. Okay, now we're getting into the big album of March, the massive project that is Beyonce's Cowboy Carter. Now, I could go on about this album and Beyonce for a very, very long time because I just have so much respect for her as an artist and her artistry and her dedication to what she has done throughout her 20-year career. Is insane to think that she's able to still basically create new art that's at the peak of the greatest things that she's made is insane, right? And so this was Act 2 in her 3-part project, of course, following Renaissance that we got in 2022. Yeah, 2022. This album, no one expected a Beyonce album this year. This came out of nowhere. And she, of all things, she teased it at the end of her own Super Bowl commercial with Verizon, I believe, which is so out of character for her. But this was a country album. I would say that this album has gotten more coverage, more publicity, both positive and negative, than any other album or artist this entire year. And I think that that's just shows the impact of Beyonce and her music and her artistry, right? And I honestly feel like people have always thought, oh yeah, she could make a country album. She's from Houston. She was raised in that background. But I don't know if anybody ever actually believed that she would do it, right? So that was definitely a surprise to everyone, especially the country fan base. I think that there has been a lot of backlash. I would say there's been support, but there's been so much that has surrounded this album. This is a very long album. It is like 25, 26 tracks, something like that. We've got collaborations from Dolly Parton, Post Malone, Miley Cyrus, Willie Nelson, Shabuzi, that just popped up on the scene right after this. Who else is on this album? Willie Jones. She brought in, she also put Rumi Carter, her daughter, on here. She brought in a group of black female country artists that are not as well known, and allowed them to sing on one of the songs. That was Raina Roberts, Tanner Adele, Brittany Spencer, and Sierra Kennedy. Some of those girls I've had the pleasure of meeting, and they are phenomenal artists. And the other ones, I just know their music and know of them, and they are great artists. And I love that she did that with this project. I think that this album as a whole, she said that it's not a Beyonce, it's not a country album, it's a Beyonce album. And I think that while it's still going to be labeled a country album, that's a very true statement. It is a Beyonce album, and that's all you can say about it, because the way this album was made, it was split into almost like 3 different chapters. We had traditional country, we had modern country, and then we had almost a progressive country, to where she kind of went through these different stages of different sounds, because there are some songs where she's just straight rapping and spitting bars on this album. I mean, Spaghetti is insane. Like, when I first listened to that song, I was like, what is she doing? Like, it was crazy to think. And also considering that it is a country leaning album, and that is kind of the push that it has been. That's also not the kind of sound that you would expect to be on this album, right? So I think that for traditional country fans, that were able to give it a try, their main problem was with it not having a true country sound. Now, I would say that that is an unfair assessment of the project, because country is an evolving genre, right? And I think that sometimes that fan base is a little bit too close-minded, just because if we look at over the years, country music has evolved and changed just like every other genre of music, right? And so it's just very, very common to hear people say, like, oh, this is not country, or that person's not country. And I think a lot of times people forget that not everything is catered specifically to their personal taste, right? So, no, not everything nowadays in country music is going to sound like Alan Jackson and George Strait. Granted, they are phenomenal artists, but I think it's important to realize and accept that change, especially in music, is going to happen, right? And I think that with this project, a lot of people that are true country listeners failed to look at this album and say she has gone through multiple decades of different types of country music and has told a story. Because one thing about Beyoncé is that she is an albums artist through and through. So this is an album that's meant to listen from start to finish, and it was so well done, so well put together. I wouldn't say that this is my favorite Beyoncé album, but it is just, when we're talking about albums and talking about albums that are just well done and not just like a hodgepodge of random songs thrown together on a canvas, this is it. This is the blueprint for that. And I mean, Renaissance was the exact same way, obviously a different genre, different type of music, but this is the blueprint of that, right? And I know that this album was born out of experiences that she had in Nashville at the CMA Awards, and just the backlash that came from that was completely absurd, right? And she performed with the Dixie Chicks and sang her song from the Lemonade album, Daddy Lessons, which was already very country leaning, which gave people that idea that we could get a whole country Beyoncé album, right? So I think that she walked out of that award show that night and started writing this album. Honestly, I think that she's had this in her mind for an extremely long time, and is just now releasing it. And I mean, we've known she's had it for a couple of years, because she said that she could have released it before Renaissance, but after COVID, she wanted to give the world something to dance to and to celebrate and things like that. So I think this album was less about being accepted by the country community and the country genre, and more about showcasing how important Black artists are in the country realm, because there's not many of those. But if anyone could Google it or had any sense to know that country music did not come from white people, it came from Black musicians. And so it was just so cool to see her not focus on herself with this project, but to put these artists that are not typically given any spotlight or not given as much attention in their realm, like this major boost and this major boom of success, right? And I mean, we saw Shabuzi, who continuously thanks and shows admiration for her, that now has like the longest running song on the Billboard Hot 100 of all time. And all of this happened shortly after he was featured on this album. Now, not to say that she is solely responsible for his success, but there are so many artists that she is putting a spotlight on that have struggled and have worked so hard for so long, that are now able to see a little bit more of a boost because of her and what she's done with this album. Granted, to get a little bit more back on topic of the album, there are some really great songs on here. Like I said, it's not my favorite Beyoncé album, but I would be lying if I said that it was not a solid album. Of course, one of the best of the year. I think that for some people, they have a certain association of sound of what Beyoncé can and should make, and I think that is totally wrong, because she's proven time and time again that she cannot be put in a box. So, I mean, props to her. I can't wait to see what she does for Act 3 for this three album project. But I think that she has just shown and continuously shown that she has so much more to offer, and she is still reaching new heights in her career. So, yeah, that's Cowboy Carter for you. Moving out of March and into April, this one was honestly a surprise for me. Let me start off by saying Tori Kelly, one of the most underrated and most amazing voices of our generation, has such a beautiful voice and can outsing literally 90% of the industry right now. But I think that she has chosen to stay true to her values and her morals and who she is as a person over conforming to the industry and what they want out of her. And I think that that is where she sacrificed a little bit of her mainstream success. However, that in no way lessens how great of an artist she is. I think that she has gone through a lot of changes as far as trying to find out what sound works best for her. And so with this album, which is just called Tori, with a period at the end of it, this was a major change. She tapped into this 2000 sound that's very R&B fused. Super cool. It's just, I don't know how to explain it, because every song in this album is taking inspiration from like a different style of music, a different genre, a different artist, whatever it is. I don't know. It's and you would think that that would cause a lot of commotion and moving from here to there, but I think when all of the songs are so well produced and so well crafted that it can work. And I think that the reason why this worked was because her and one of the greatest producers we have right now, John Bellion, worked on this album together, right? And I mean, listen to some of these collaborations we have on the album. La Seraphim, who are a K-pop band, Ira Star, who is an Afrobeats R&B artist. There is a song with John Bellion on that album. There's a lot going on, and when you think about those artists specifically right there are all completely different genres, have completely different sounds. And so when you put Tori Kelly with them, she's going to fit into literally anything you put her in because of her voice and how insane it is. So yeah, I'm just so blown away with how well she did with this album. And I don't even think that it hit on the Billboard 200, which is very, very, very depressing. But that in no way does that mean that it's not a successful album. That does not mean that it's not a quality album. She has really found her sound with this and her confidence, and I think that she is a great role model for people, right? And I was able to see her this year as well in concert, and she's just so full of light, and her music is so full of joy and confidence, and I think that that's something that is sometimes missing in the music industry, especially in pop music. So props to her, and I hope she continues down this R&B fused path, because man, is it a wonderful, wonderful album. Next, this is an artist that has kind of had their breakthrough this year, and that is Khruangbin. Khruangbin, Khruangbin, which means airplane in Spanish. But this was their fourth album, Ala Sala, and they are a one-of-a-kind band. I have no idea how to describe them. They have an indie sound. They have like this Western soundtrack kind of sound, a little bit of funk, a little dance in there. But the thing about it is that they have almost no lyrics in their music. This is entirely an album, and most of their work is entirely projects that rely solely on them playing original compositions and music. And that is not something that we see very often. That is not something that we really ever hear anybody do, honestly. I mean, we hear maybe some artists that have an instrumental track or an outro, but to have a full body of work that is nothing but the most beautiful guitar and bass playing together that just creates something so beautiful is insane. That I have just fallen in love with their music this year, and so I was able to get tickets to see them in Nashville. And I have to say, like, that was one of the most fun shows that I went to, because everyone there was honestly so much cooler than I was, but was just let loose and having a good time and dancing around and just literally being free and not really concerned with what's happening around them. And I think that that is such a cool, unique experience. And I think that their music has the ability to do that exact same thing with the recorded audio as well as the live audio. It sounds identical, and I think that that is something that's very hard to do, and also is just not common to do at all, right? And so I think the first time I had heard of them was a couple years ago. They have 2 EPs with Leon Bridges. So if you're familiar with Leon's music, they have a very similar vibe to some of Leon's work, especially around his album Gold Digger Sound. Yeah, they have that kind of, that feel, that sound. But they also have some really interesting collaborations. They're on Childish Gambino's new album, which is an insane but really cool mashup of different types of music there. But they have tapped into a genre, a sound, a type of music that is not explored very much at all. And I think that it's going to continue to grow and blow up. And I think that what's happened for them is that they're so unique, so different, and people were longing for something like that has allowed them to succeed so much and just blow up this year. And I mean, so much that they got a Grammy nomination for Best New Artist, and I did not expect that at all, which I was really excited, as I'm a really big fan of them now. But that was super surprising to me. But I think that just shows that they're a one-of-a-kind talent, and they're doing something that has never been done before. It's very rarely celebrated. So I'm super big fan of them and just what they have to offer. Next, we've got another alternative release, and that was Only God Was Above Us by Vampire Weekend. So this was the first full album from Vampire Weekend that I actually really liked. And I don't think that is necessarily because my music taste has evolved over time, because I've gone back and listened to their music, and they just did not connect with me the way that this album did. So I just really enjoyed the originality in this. And like I've said that with a lot of these bands, is that they have something very unique to their sound. And I don't think that they have like these amazing, crazy vocals, but what they do have is this very phenomenal instrumentation, and it's almost classical in some points, that I feel like it's very different for anything that they've ever done before, but at the same time still very in tune with who Vampire Weekend is as a band. I would say that this was a long overdue album. I think 2019 was the last time they put out an album, and this was a very well critically acclaimed album. Everyone expected it to be nominated for Album of the Year, the Grammys. So it was just very well received. I think that the crazy thing is it did kind of go under the radar. I mean, they debuted on the charts like 26 spots lower than their last album, and I think that that's just because they have like a fan base that has stuck with them. However, they have been gone for so long that people have not been exposed to their music on a larger scale like they have been back in the day. And so I think that it's a really solid project for them. If you enjoy things that are just a little bit different, I definitely would give it a try for sure. So moving into this next one, we have Benson Boone. So I remember Benson Boone when he was on American Idol a couple years ago, and Katy Perry said, Benson Boone, like, this is a star. You're going to be a star. And she was right, 100%. He is filling in a gap that we have in the pop male category right now, right? People are looking for something new and fresh, and he has filled that spot. I've kind of kept up with him for a couple years, followed his early work, and I was very impressed with what he had to offer in his EPs and his early releases, right? And this year we got a full album from him, Fireworks and Rollerblades, and he has just skyrocketed. Of course, this album has his hit song, Beautiful Things, and also has Slow It Down, which also did extremely well on the charts. And then he ended up having a third hit that also did very, very well, Pretty Slowly. He has just tapped into a core fan base already that loves him. And of course, he got to perform for Taylor Swift on the Eras Tour for a date or two, so he's tapped into that audience. He just had a massive blow up, and he's like one of the top billed people for Coachella next year, which is insane. He's great, and of course, he's very charismatic. I think he's very true to who he is as a person, and I think that his songs are catchy. I think that they're definitely radio bait in a couple spots. But I think that it's still a very solid album, and he's definitely holding it down for the men in pop music right now. I will say that if he is in the future, he's been, I know, teasing a lot of songs, but I think right now he is still known for being the Beautiful Things guy that does backflips, and I think that is very, very true. And while this is a solid project, I haven't found myself going back to it as much as some of these other releases. But I think that as long as he continues to just kind of evolve his sound, try new things, he'll be fine. I think that as long as he doesn't stay complacent in a certain sound, and in his songwriting, he will be 100% fine. But on that note, we are going to call it quits right here for this episode, and we're going to pick back up with a couple more releases from May and on into the rest of this year on the next episode next week. Obviously, I have rambled on about so many albums, so maybe this will give you some time to look into those albums and see which ones you like, see which ones you don't like. Maybe let me know which ones you think that I have left out. I will have some honorable mentions and some other notable releases at the end. So if you think I skipped one, just hold on. I've got some more surprises up my sleeve. But yes, we will pick back up on the next episode with some more releases and get you guys some new music. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.